Welcome to Python by example. In this series, we want to have a look at the Python programming language and how we can use it effectively to create solutions for problems that we might face in the real world. We are going to be using as our IDE, that is our integrated development environment, something known as EduBlocks for the first set of lectures, as it provides us with an easy way to get started. So I'm going to open a new tab, and the URL is app.edublocks.org. And once you're there, you want to ensure that you select Python 3, which is the compiler. And you want to choose the text-only feature. And then you hit the Create button. We are now given a screen that is divided into two parts. We have the section for our code, which is the left section, and we have the section for our output, which is the right section. So as the name suggests, programming by example. So we are going to be writing some codes, and we are going to explain things as we move along. One of the first things that you want to be able to do in a programming language is to display information onto the screen. In other words, we want to generate some output. And the command that allows us to do this in Python is the print command. So it's print followed by rounded brackets. And inside the rounded brackets, we are going to put an open quote and a close quote. So this is double quotes. In other words, it's going to be like this. And inside the double quotes, you're going to type the message that you want to be printed on the screen. And traditionally, the message is hello world. So this is our code. We now have to execute it to see the output. And we're going to do that by hitting the run button. Now, as you have a look inside our output window, you realize that it has indeed printed hello world. So let's clear the output screen. The next thing I want to print is my name. So I'm just going to change the message so that it prints my name. So that's my name, Horace Scarlett. I'm going to hit the run button again. And once again in the output window, we are seeing the output, which happens to be my name. So this is how easy it is to use the print statement. But there are a few things that you want to bear in mind about the print statement. We can customize how things look within a simple print statement because we can use new line characters or we can use tabs. So let me start with the tabs first. So a \t will give us one tab. So I'm putting in 3 tabs. And we're going to execute and see what kind of difference this actually makes. And as you look at the output, it should become apparent that the use of the tab is to give us some space between the elements that we are printing on the screen. Let us now examine the use of the \n command. So it's / and then the end, n. And we're going to hit run. And you can see displayed right here is the fact that we have now put Scarlett on a new line. So once we use the \n, then what that does is to create a new line. And obviously, we can create multiple lines using this method. So I've just put in 4 new lines, and we're going to execute. And now have a look at the space that is being shown between my first name and my last name. And the reason why there's so much space is because we have created several new lines. All right, great. So at this point, you all know how to print. But in order to do things which are a little bit more involved, then we also need to understand how to accept input from the user. So that's the next thing that we're going to do. I want to be able to have the user enter their first name and their last name, and then I want to be able to print that onto the screen. So let me get rid of what I had before. And I'm now going to say fname is equal to Bob. Lname is equal to White. Please note, Bob and White are still placed in double quotes. And then I'm going to use the print statement, but it's going to look a little bit different than what we had before. So we still have our rounded brackets, but before the double quotes, I'm going to put an F. And the F signifies to the print statement that we're going to do a formatted print. Now I'm going to put a comment, and we can start a comment by using the number sign. And a comment just allows us to put words within the program that help to define what is happening. So these codes or comments are not going to be executed. They're just there to give a better understanding of what is happening within the program. So this is a formatted print statement that will display the content of variables. And we still have a talk about what variables are, but let's demonstrate first, and then we'll go back and talk about variables. So my name is fname in the curly brackets, lname in the curly brackets. So please have a look at the set of commands so far. So fname is equal to Bob, lname is equal to White. We are using a formatted print statement to print my name is, and then we have fname in the curly brackets and lname in the curly brackets. We're going to execute, and based on the output, it displays my name is followed by the value in fname, followed by the value in lname. So I think it's now time to backtrack just a little bit. And we are backtracking so that we can understand what the computer understands by the command fname equal Bob and lname equal White. So these are what we call variables. And a variable is a named container that stores data. So we are going to give a container a name, and we want this container to hold some data. It's important for readability purposes to ensure that the container has a name that is descriptive enough so that anybody who reads the program can understand what kind of data is being stored. So fname would imply that we want to store a person's first name. And lname would imply that we want to store a person's last name. These are variables. And because the values are in double quotes, then we know that those are string values or text values. So values in double quotes are string or text values. And string or text values are those kind of values which are descriptive in terms of they contain mostly characters so that we can read what is there. Now, just another note, Python also uses single quotes to represent string or text values as well. So if you see something that looks like this, where we are using single quotes instead of double quotes, then our intent is the same. We are also creating variables that can hold string values. So let's clear the output, let's execute, and there we go. My name is, followed by the first name, followed by the last name. A few important concepts to understand with the formatted string. First of all, it allows us to be able to combine our message with the content of our variables. In order to display the content of our variables, we need to wrap the variable name inside the curly brackets. And that's exactly what we have done in this instance. We have the variable lname, and we have wrapped that variable inside the curly brackets. The order in which we place these variables within the string will determine the position at which the content of the variable is actually displayed. For example, let me take the fname variable and let me place it at the front. So originally, our string says, or our output says, my name is Sue Clark, but now I have placed fname at the beginning of the string. And we are going to clear the output and execute. And now the output says Sue, which is the content of fname. My name is, and Clark, which is the content of lname. So the point that we're making here is that the position of the variables inside the curly brackets within the string will determine where the data that is stored inside these variables are actually going to be displayed when the message is outputted on the screen. All right, I'm going to add one more variable. I'm going to call this one age. And it's going to be 25. I'm going to rewrite my formatted string so that it looks a little bit different. My first name is followed by fname. And then a new line. My last name is followed by lname. Remember, once we want to display the contents of the variable, then we need to wrap it in the curly brackets. And then my age is And then we wrap age inside the curly bracket. So what are we doing here? We're doing a couple of things. We're displaying some messages. We're displaying the content of some variables. And we are formatting these outputs so that they are placed on different lines. And that is why we are making use of the \n character. Remember, \n is actually going to display a new line. So let's clear our output screen and let's re-execute. And there we have our output being displayed on several lines. My first name is Sue, which is the content of fname. My last name is Clark, which is the content of lname. And my age is 25, which is the content of the age variable. Now, a distinction has to be made because if we look at the age variable, we realize that it is not contained inside quotes. So there's no double quote, there is no single quote. And the reason for that is because this is a numeric value. And we have two types of numeric values. We have integers and we have real numbers. An integer is a whole number, which means it does not contain a decimal point. And these are numbers that you are very used to, like 15, like -78, and so on. So these are whole numbers. There's no decimal point. When we talk about real numbers, we're talking about those numbers that contain a decimal point. For example, if you look at the value pi in mathematics, it's 3.14. So that's a real number. It has a decimal portion. If we look at something like tax, like a 15% tax, then that's going to be 0.15 for 15% tax. That is also an example of a number that has a decimal point. And we can have several numbers following that decimal point. Those are all real numbers. Despite the kind of variable, however, whether or not it's a string value or a numeric value, please note that we can use the formatted string in the same manner to display the content of that variable. And that's what we have demonstrated in this particular example. So let's say, for example, there's a temperature and the temperature is 24.8 degrees Celsius, for example. Then we could also incorporate that into our print statement. So it's print or rounded brackets, F, because we want to have a formatted print statement. And then the temperature is temp in curly brackets, degrees Celsius. So here we go in terms of our output. We are going to re-execute. So my first name is Sue, my last name is Clark, my age is 25, and the temperature is 24.8 degrees Celsius. So we are looking here at three types of data: string, integers, and real numbers. Another name that you'll find commonly used to represent real numbers are floating point numbers. If you hear us talk about a floating point number, or if you hear it being mentioned, then please note that it's a real number, a number that also contains a decimal point. There is one final variable that we want to have a look at, and this variable is known as the Boolean variable. And the purpose of the Boolean variable is to store one of two possible values, either a true value or a false value. For example, fees paid. Well, this can be true to indicate that the fee has been paid. And we are going to do a print statement once again with a formatted print. Have you paid your fees? That's a question. And the answer is going to be fees paid. Well, fees underscore paid. So let's have a look at all of this being printed. We clear our screen and we execute. My first name is Sue. My last name is Clark. My age is 25. The temperature is 24.8 degrees Celsius. And have you paid your fees? Well, the answer is true. What if the fees had not been paid? Then we could have set this to false. Remember, a Boolean allows us to store one of two values. The value can either be true or the value can be false. So we are clearing the output and we are going to re-execute. And this time, for the question, have you paid your fees? Then this time the answer is false. Now, the final thing that we want to look at to kind of wrap up this particular session is to have the user be the ones who input these values. As you would have observed by looking at what I was doing all along, it was the programmer, me, who determined what the first name is, what the last name is, what the age is, etc. But in terms of writing programs that are going to be applicable or useful, then it means that we need to write it in such a way that the input is generated not by us, the programmers, but by the persons who are going to be using the program. In other words, we want our users to be able to determine what these values are going to be. So let's try that out. How do we modify this program so that we can have the user input as an integral part of the process? And in order to accomplish this, we're going to be making use of a command known as input. So I'm going to delete all the variables. Remember, it's programming by example. And I'm going to recreate them one by one as we look at how we are going to achieve our final outcome. So first of all, I'm going to create back the variable called fname. And let's say it's equal to, then I'm going to use the input command. So the input command is similar to the print command. It's input, the keyword, followed by the rounded brackets. Inside the rounded brackets, we have the double quotes, and then we have the question that we want to ask. We call this question a prompt because it's providing some sort of information to the user so they understand what is required of them. So enter your first name. And I'm putting a colon and a space. Now I'm also going to get rid of all of my print statements so that once again, can demonstrate things from the ground up. I want to see if this fname value, if I can actually take it from the user and display it on the screen. So print, we're going to use a formatted print because we want to display the content of fname. And let's simply say first name equal And then we are going to have fname inside of the curly brackets. Now moving forward, just in terms of simplicity, whenever I'm talking about the curly brackets, I simply say curly. And whenever I'm talking about the rounded brackets, I simply say rounded. So let's have a look here at what is going to obtain whenever we execute this particular program. So we have one variable called fname. We're making use of the input command so that we can accept data from the user. And we want to print a message that indicates what the user would have entered for their first name. So let's execute. So there is a prompt that says enter your first name, and we see a blinking cursor or a cursor that is blinking. And it's blinking to indicate that at that point we can enter some input. So let's say that the person's name is Jason. After we have entered the data, we need to hit the enter key that is provided on the keyboard. So I'm going to hit enter. And then it prints for me first name equal Jason. It echoes back the value that was obtained from the user. It therefore means that our program is working as intended. We have allowed the user to determine what the first name value is going to be, and we have displayed that on the screen. I'm going to put a new line in my print statement right at the beginning so that we can get some separation between the input and the output. So I'm actually placing two new lines. I'm going to clear the output and we're going to re-execute. So enter first name. Let's enter a different first name. Let's say it's Mary. We're going to now hit the enter key. And notice it indicates to us that the first name is actually equal to Mary. So we can do the same thing now for L name. And let us make our life easier. We just copy, we paste, and we change what is necessary. So I'm creating another variable called L name. And this time it should say, in terms of the prompt, enter your last name. I'm going to do another print statement. This time I only want one new line. And I want it to say last name equal, followed by whatever is inside the variable L name. Let's clear our output. Let's re-execute. Enter your first name, Mary, Salmon, and we are seeing that in terms of the display, we are displaying the content of F name, which is Mary, and we're displaying the content of L name, which is Salmon. Remember, the variables are here, which we are using back inside our print statements. And in order to use them in our print statements, we have to wrap them inside of the curlies. Let's now also accept the age. Now the age, we're going to treat it a little bit differently, and I'll demonstrate why first. So let's say that age is 15. And the person age has increased. Then we can say age is equal to age plus 1. And what this means is the person was 15, but because we have added 1 to age, the person is now actually 16. So if we do a print, so that we can display the age of the person. Age is equal to age in curly. And we clear our output and we re-execute. It asks us to enter the first name, Mary White, for the last name. And notice it says first name is Mary, last name is White, but age is now 16. Well, we know that it was 15 before. We added 1 to it, so it actually changes. In other words, this goes back to the concept that age was a numeric value. But here's something very interesting. I'm going to clear the output. And instead of allowing age to be a numeric, I'm going to allow age to be a string. Note, I'm wrapping the 15 inside a double quote. And we are going to see what obtains when we actually execute this particular program. So let's run. Enter first name, Jason Clark, and have a look. It is now giving us what is called a type error. And it's giving us a type error because we are trying to do an operation that it does not understand. Note we had not gotten this error before when age was numeric. But because age is now a string, we are obtaining this error. And we are obtaining it because what we are trying to do here is we are trying to add a numeric value 1 to a string value 1, 5. So this value that we are looking up at here, which we stored inside age, is actually not 15. It's actually 1, 5 because it is being represented or seen as being a string value. And that's why we end up with this sort of error situation. So it's important to remember that if you want to do any sort of numeric operation, then you need to ensure that the variables that you are working with and the values that you are working with are values which are numeric in nature. Luckily for us, the Python language provides a way in which we can convert a numeric string. So this example is an example of a numeric string. It is a string, but when we look inside of the string, we only see numeric values. So a 1 is a numeric value, a 5 is a numeric value. We can convert a numeric string into its numeric equivalent. In other words, we are saying that we can convert 1, 5, which is the string value, into 15, which is the numeric value. Notice the 15 on the right is not enclosed inside double quotes. Now I'm saying that we have an operation that allows us to do this conversion. And that operation is called int, if we want to convert from a numeric string to an integer. So I've just wrapped that 15, that numeric string, inside the int command. So it's int, and then we have our rounded, and inside the rounded, we have our numeric string. So what this does is it converts the numeric string 15 into its numeric equivalent. And then we store that numeric equivalent 15 inside the age variable. In the second line, we're then going to be adding 1 to 15, and we're going to put the result inside age. So 15 plus 1 give us 16, and we place that 16 inside of the age variable. So let's execute and let's see what obtains in this case. So Jason, Green, and notice we no longer have any errors. We have displayed first name is Jason, the last name is Green, and the age is now 16 once more, because we have converted the numeric string 15 into the numeric equivalent 15, and we have added 1 to it, which gives us the value 16. Let me get rid of one of these new lines so that I can eliminate the line that is here. Let's clear the output, re-execute. Bob, Marley, and I'm still seeing a new line that I don't want. And that is before last name. So it means I need to get rid of it from here. And I think I should be good now. So let's re-execute. So Bob, Marley, and there we go. So first name is Bob, last name is Marley, and age is 16. Final thing. In this example, the 15 was determined by the programmer. And we don't want to have that. We want the user to determine what this value is going to be. In order to do this, we have to once again make use of our input command. So let me comment out this line so we can have it as a reference. So that line is no longer going to take part in the execution. And let's say age is equal to input or rounded brackets. And then we tell the user to enter their age. We're going to re-execute and we are going to see what happens. Please pay special attention to what is about to unfold. So we execute Bob, Marley, enter age. Let's enter 20 for age. And we hit enter. And notice it says type error once again. And whenever we see this type error, we know that we are working with incompatible data types. Now the question is, why do we end up with the type error? And the answer is very simple. Whenever we are making use of the input command, we will always end up with a string. So input always gives us a string. That's something I want you to bear in mind. Whenever you use the input command, you're always getting a string. It therefore means that the 20 that was entered was not 20. It was actually 20, a numeric string. Now you already know how to work with a numeric string if it is that you want to do mathematical operations. It has to be converted. So I'm going to take the output of the input statement. So the input output is going to be 20, or put that another way. The output of this input command is going to be 20 because that is what I am entering as the user. I want that 20 to be converted to 20. So I'm going to wrap that inside the int command. And to wrap it inside the int command, we type int, and then we use the rounded bracket to encompass or to cover that entire input command. Let's try this again and see what obtains this time. So enter your first name, Bob, Marley. So we're entering age. Remember, once we are dealing with input, then everything that we enter is treated as a string. So this value here is actually 20, meaning we're entering a numeric string. Note though, this time we did not get any error, and we were able to successfully add the 1 to age, moving it from 20 to 21. And the reason for that is we had actually done the conversion of 20 right at this point in the program. We ended up with 20, which was then stored inside the age variable. We then added 1 to the 20, which was then restored inside the age variable. So the current value inside the age variable at this point in the program is no longer 20, but it's now 21. And that concludes it for the first session in terms of Python by example. And in our next session, we want to have a look at our conditional statements. Take care.